We're here today at the Warsaw Security Conference with Baroness Kathy Ashton, and the Warsaw Security Forum brings together a whole bunch of people from all over Europe, but also with a special focus on Eastern and Central Europe and the Baltics. Kathy, can you talk to us a little bit about some of the key themes of this conference? It is transatlantic, but it is also focused on European security. What are the key themes here for you?
So there are 2,500 people here from all over Europe, from beyond, of course, many representatives from the United States, people from Taiwan, people from different parts of the world. And the main focus of the conference each year is, of course, what's happening in Ukraine. For Poland, this is their neighbourhood, their direct neighbourhood. And for many of the participants who've come from Kyiv and who are either now based in Poland or have come specially for this conference, they want to get their messages across of the importance of Europe, the United States, everyone, staying with them, being prepared to help and support them, not only succeed in terms of preventing Russia from doing more incursions, but helping them to win and to win the war.
Do you have advice for the policymakers who are coming to this conference and having the opportunity to meet with people from Ukraine and from Central and Eastern Europe and from Poland? What would you advise them to do during this conference?
I often say about this conference that when you're here, you get a different perspective. You know, we often travel around. Many policymakers spend their lives on planes and trains going to different conferences, talking with different people. But when you're here, you get a perspective that is quite different to anything you might get in Washington or London or Paris or Berlin. It is the perspective from Central Europe about what's happening down the road. And that's really important because for policymakers, for strategists, for people trying to work out what we do next, how do we support Ukraine, where does this go, and eventually where does it all end? Being able to sit with people for whom this is the reality day to day, but also the people for whom there are great concerns that unless this is stopped, unless Russia is prevented from taking Ukraine in any sense, then they feel that they could be next on the list. They could certainly suffer one way or another from an emboldened Russia in Europe.
You'll be speaking on a panel this afternoon. Do you want to give us a preview?
We'll be going to be talking this afternoon about what they call the polycrisis. It's a word that seems to have really been brought into being in 2024 to explain why we are thinking in so many different terms in so many different places at the same time. In my experience, actually, we've probably always had polycrisis. I can't remember a time when we only had one to deal with.
You know very well from your past work with the European Union, of course, many polycrises for you as well.
Exactly. They don't come along neatly. They come along all together. They layer on top of each other. They add complications, not least in bandwidth. And I think at the moment there's a real sense that if you look across the world, it's hard to find a region where there isn't at least one and probably several crises. And the kind of crises that not only affect the individual communities or countries, but have the capacity to spill over and to create regional challenges. And I think that's the theme that I'm going to try and explore this afternoon is how do we try and prevent a crisis or a problem from getting worse? You know, the first rule of diplomacy is stop things getting worse and then try and roll back. And in too many parts of the world, we have the potential to see crises get out of control. And anyone who thinks that doesn't affect us only needs to look at what's happening in terms of migration flows, of people fleeing the horrors of war and chaos, the effects of climate change, to see that that does affect us directly, just in terms of people, but also economically, politically, in everything that we do. So this is a real time to, in a sense, reflect on what more we can do.
Baroness Kathy Ashton, thank you so much for sharing some of your perspectives on this with us. And I am also going to be listening to that panel with your book in mind, your book And Then What, which looked at crises and how to foresee into the future what might happen next. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.